All right. Good morning, all. Happy November 1. Let me see your happy Thanksgiving smiles. Very nice. We'll work on it. Okay. Hey, we're going to do our roll call. We're going to do our minutes and our summaries. And then we have a huge thing for you today. Lots of learning. So going to go ahead and call roll. If you'll just say here, that would be fantastic. Starting with Kelly Abbott. All right, Norma. I see Norma's phone, so we'll put a question mark by that. Michelle Bradley.
I'm here.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi.
Ashley Chase.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Anna Cole.
Here.
Thank you, Anna. Jenna, I just saw you.
Here.
Yes. Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
Sergeant Cotter.
Hi.
In the house. Dennis.
Here.
Hi, Dennis. Janelle, we know you're here because you had 150 trick-or-treaters. Dave Hayes. Chelsea. Chelsea here? No? Okay. Kevin Lash.
He's here. Good morning.
Hi again. David Lee.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Timothy Smelzer. Renee.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning, Renee. Beth.
Here.
Yes. Good morning, Beth. My neighbor, Becky, I see you.
Good morning.
Elizabeth.
Here.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Lynette. I've seen a lot of Lynette actually over the past couple of weeks, but I don't see her today yet. All right. Then there's me and Jana. Jana's insert. Okay. Is there anybody I did not call? I think I got it.
Brandon.
All right. Oh, Brandon. That's
Yeah.
very crazy that I don't have you. Hi, Brandon.
Hello.
All right. Anybody else that I missed?
Stephanie, this is Norma. I put something in the chat, but I wanted you to know I am on.
Fantastic. I see you, Norma. You're on a train from Barcelona to Madrid. You are a dedicated task force.
I was about to
member,
say,
Norma.
this is maybe a high commitment.
Yeah,
Why
Norma, I
not?
don't know if I would have called in.
I was like, hey, yo, I'm in Europe, but good luck.
Yeah, I would think of you all in my heart, but that would be as far as it would go for me. All right. Okay. Let us move to the approval of the October 11th, 23 minutes. Everyone should have received a copy of those. Are there any edits that need to be made to those minutes? I see no hands. Okay. Seeing no edits, if we could please have a motion to approve the October 11th minutes and a second, and please announce your name as you make those motions.
This is Norma. I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Norma.
This is Janelle and I second.
Thank you, Janelle. Anybody opposed to the approval and passage of the October 11th, 23 minutes? All right, let the record reflect. We have no opposition to that. Those meeting minutes will pass. Moving on to the meeting recap. Again, you're all familiar with the meeting recap. It is an extended version of your meeting minutes from October 11th. Are there any additions, again, edits that you would like to see made to that meeting recap? All right, I see a lot of no's, no, head shake no's. Okay, if I again could have a motion and a second to pass the meeting recap from October 11th of 23, and please announce your name as you do that motion.
I'll motion to pass. Ashley Chase.
Thank you, Ashley.
I'll second. Becky Miller Updike.
Thanks, Becky. All right, is there anybody who is opposed to the passage of the October 11th meeting recap? All right, I see no one, so that meeting recap will pass. And therein lies my very technical work for the day. Trace, it is up to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Good morning, all. Good to see you all. Appreciate y'all being here. And we also have a lot of our guests here today too. So good morning to each of you and excited to introduce you in a little bit. I'm going to hand it over to Jordan to kind of overview what our next steps are. We've got a little bit of maneuvering to do and a little bit of ground setting. So Jordan, go ahead. I'll hand it to you.
Good morning, everyone. As Stephanie said, we have a lot of information download to go on today as we begin our work in our individual subcommittees, either for prevention or intervention. We're still working through slightly how to technically hold both of these spaces for the subcommittees and also record the video so that we can continue to post those conversations online. Hopefully by next meeting, we'll figure out how to do that in breakout rooms. But for this meeting, we are going to have our intervention subcommittee jump onto a separate Zoom line where we can record and work there. And then we will jump back from that separate Zoom line into this line where we'll hold public comment and wrap up for the day. We'll be giving you those Zoom lines as we go, so you won't be missing anything. And you'll have time to do that. We have speakers for both subcommittees today, which is wonderful. We have our guests from Texas and Vermont who are on the line presently. So all of my Texas guests, you're going to come with me into the intervention line. So when I put the Zoom in the chat, please jump onto that line. We'll give everyone a time to get kind of separated and get into their proper rooms. Last meeting, everyone kind of self-selected into a subcommittee, which was great. We got a few messages from a couple members who maybe wanted to switch or pick a different subcommittee, which is fine because we largely had a fairly even division. What we're going to ask today is that everyone, again, please self-select into the subcommittee you want to sit in, but then we're going to ask that you stay there. So today's kind of the final day to pick the subcommittee you want to sit on. Again, we have prevention, which is going to cover everything up until the point a youth leaves a campus, and then intervention, which will cover everything once a youth steps foot off a campus. So that's kind of our dividing line and clarification. Obviously, we'll have some overlap, but that's largely the conversations that we're going to cover there. Once we break into our subcommittee groups, we're going to hear conversations. If you're in prevention, you'll be hearing from our friends from Vermont. If you're in intervention, you'll be hearing from our friends in Texas. Again, everyone has been provided all the materials. We'll record everything. You'll get meeting recaps from both subcommittees so you can stay in touch with what's going on in the other subcommittee. And that being said, I know that we sent you a lot of information. Brian has joined our team. He is wonderful at research and pulling down other states, what's going on, resources and summary guides, but we know that you didn't have a lot of time with them because we're still kind of getting rolling on that process. So the way that the order of the meetings are going to work is this. We're going to go in, we're going to have our presentations by our guests. We're going to do some Q&A with our guests. Then we're going to have everyone in both subcommittees break or effectively go off camera for 15 minutes so you can sit with those materials. You can kind of go through them, you can digest them in lieu of the presentations that you're about to hear. Again, we appreciate it's a lot of materials to come through. When you go and do that, please focus on the summary sheets that Brian prepared for all of you. You'll notice I kind of delineated them in the email. You have kind of the pre-work. That's what I would focus your attention on for the 15 minutes, but also take a look at those resources, those Colorado statute and reg summaries and the child gateway summaries as well. And then after that, once we get all together, we'll come back, we'll do public comment, and then we'll break. Any questions on kind of the order of things or how we're going to move through it? Okay, Trace, have I forgotten anything?
No, I just say, like, to keep in mind as we're listening to, we kind of know that we're like running dual conversations, right? Like you might have more questions for our speakers after you actually look at the materials about Colorado, but just the timing. So we're kind of running this in a dual track here, and we recognize that. So, but we wanted to make sure that we use the most of our time today. So I think our speakers, a lot of them are staying on for the continued conversation, but if not, we can certainly come back. So just want to name that. If you feel like because of the materials you review later, you actually have more questions for how other states handled those things, we can circle back there. So that's all.
Okay, so I'm going to put the Zoom link for intervention. So if you're joining the intervention subcommittee, please click on the Zoom link.
I dropped it in.
Thank you. There
You
twice.
did. You did it both.
All right, Trace, I'm going to hop as well.
Okay, so intervention folks, just click on your Zoom link and then you'll get a link back to come.
There you go.
Awesome. Were you getting ready to say something, Jordan?
I was just talking to myself. I'm so sorry. Yes, which is Doris, I'll take my cue from you whenever you're ready to start.
Awesome, fantastic. I think we are ready to get started. You want me to kick off the intro and sort of set up for our speakers?
Sure, however you like. You just let me know where you need me, Doris.
All right, fantastic. So my apologies, I was out for the last meeting, so part of it is a little bit of catch up. So we are really excited to have some friends from Texas join us today as we dive into more deeply into intervention approaches, strategies, protocols. So today you're going to hear from Texas's Special Investigations Division, which will talk about their processes for responding when youth run away from care. The unit has regionalized investigators that assist with locating and serving youth who run away from care, as well as standard protocols, which I know this committee is very interested in for responding when youth run away. They'll provide an overview of their system and how they implemented their program. And so one of the things that I think we'll be especially interested in learning about, and perhaps we'll talk about in some of the Q&A discussion that we have is, how you got to the place that you're at today. Some of the lessons learned along the way, I think, will be especially helpful. So we have Damaris Nicholson, who's a program specialist of the Special Investigations Division at the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, and Greg Eakins, the Director of Special Investigations in the Special Investigations Division also at the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Welcome, Greg and Damaris. We're really happy to have you. I'm gonna I don't know which one of you is gonna give the bulk of the presentation, but I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, I'll start off here. First of all, we appreciate the invite. We like to see what other states are doing, because although everything's bigger in Texas, it's not necessarily better. So we learn as we go. So we have a kind of a short PowerPoint that kind of lead us into our discussion. If you're okay with Damaris sharing her screen.
Awesome. Yeah, we're happy to make sure that you can share screen. Do you have the share screen option, or do we have to make you a co-host? Okay, perfect. We love presentations. Well, I don't know about we. I love presentations. It helps me to track the conversation a little bit better. You muted yourself, Greg.
I thought maybe somebody voted. So we use Teams for everything. So sometimes the Zoom links are difficult for us to navigate. We have the web version, but not the app version. Let me see if I can get mine to work here. Okay, what do you see?
We see a giant me.
Oh, all right. Well,
but we see your presentation on the side.
All right, so let me see if I can make this bigger. What do you think now?
If you can put it in presentation mode.
How about
Perfect.
That?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So Texas DFPS manages several divisions of Family and Protective Services, which is Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, which is our ongoing care from either pre-court involved monitoring of the family or through the foster care system. And then there's child care investigations and residential child care investigations, but the special investigators are part of child protective investigations, which includes anything involving the family. We are statewide, regionally managed, and sometimes county-based as far as units and supervision goes, but the overall umbrella is for the state. So for special investigations, we're part of several regions, but we're our own organization. So where we typically have region 1 through 11 for the traditional families, we have region 508, for instance, would be the special investigators. So although I have special investigators in each of the regions, we're all one group. Back in 2005, the 79th legislature recognized that there was a need for, at the time, Child Protective Services was the all-encompassing, what is now CPI and CPS. And they said, we need to bring some law enforcement experience into these investigations, these serious investigations, the fatalities. Back then, trafficking wasn't quite the word that it is now, but there were a lot of times when that law enforcement experience come into play. And it's not uncommon across the state that sometimes child protective investigations don't come from the same background. So when it comes to interviewing perpetrators and suspects and working with law enforcement, it just made sense. So that created the special investigations. Over time, we were integrated with child protective investigations, and then eventually we became our own division. So I have there's about 308 FTEs altogether, with 279 being special investigators in the field. And you'll see a map here in a second. I have 5 regional directors, but because there's so few of us, my regional directors cover several regions. I have 29 program directors, which is in our program is the first line supervisor for the special investigators. And then 2 program specialists on the books that handle different things. And then, of course, myself. Texas is comprised of 254 counties. It's big. When you look at what the special investigators support across the state in all those programs you see on the slide here, we have over 2,600 investigators. That would be your caseworkers. We have master investigator program, our CPS, our conservator side, and the FBSS, family-based safety services. There's another 3,000 people we support. Parental child safety placement, the master conservatorship workers, adult protective services, residential child care licensing investigators, child care licensing investigators, and a community-based care staff. So the 300 of us are spread pretty thin. So because of that, we have kind of some specialized and defined roles. We do work some primary cases, which include fatality cases, cases where law enforcement might be the alleged perpetrator, or employees are the alleged perpetrators in their family cases, or if employees are the alleged perpetrator in cases regarding children in conservatorship or children in our care. And that's relatively new. Last couple months, we kind of narrowed it down. But by being involved in those few categories, it allows us to do one of the things that's most important to us, and that's to locate children that are missing from care and families that are avoiding CPS. Our special investigators come from a law enforcement background. A lot of them are retired. I just hired a retired FBI agent out of Houston. Glad to have him. We've hired retired Secret Service. We hired a lot of retired Austin and Houston Police Department, and we've even hired some from Colorado. That was a real good catch for us, especially going into this conversation. All of them have an investigative background in crimes against children or other major crimes. So, for instance, we'll hire somebody that's maybe spent a career in narcotics. Well, one, that's somebody that knows how to find people, and that's somebody that knows how to talk to people. Homicide detectives, again, it's that communication and MDT process. And then, of course, retired troopers, believe it or not. That's been a great catch for us because they're so detail-oriented in their investigations. And they do a lot of whodunit type cases, right? So hit and runs with a fatality, there's a lot of work goes involved in that. So that's been really good for us. So between the 308 staff that I have when I'm fully have a full boat, that's a lot of years of experience to draw from. This is what Texas looks like in our regions, as I refer to regions. Region 7 is in the middle where Austin is. So there's 30 counties for Region 7. It's one of our busiest areas, of course. But our busiest area is down in Region 6, 6A and B. I think Harris County has a population of 4 million people. So with that population comes a lot of activity and work for us. But I show you the map because one of the things I wanted to, I guess, kind of share with y'all what works for us is the fact that, child protective investigations or DFPS in general is a state operation. So there's a lot of communication. There's also a lot in the leadership ranks where I can get somebody in Region 1 to do something they're supposed to do to support Region 6. And that's been real effective for us. I understand some states are county-based, and that's probably a great thing. But for us, it works real good here that we have kind of a statewide oversight. And selfishly, when it comes to the special investigators, it works real well. When you have less than 300 staff to cover the whole state, you need to have some continuity when it comes to the expectations and to accomplish the mission that's set. So as you see my map, we have a lot of children that go missing from care in Region 1, for instance. We have Amarillo, we have Lubbock, we have some big cities, and some population. With community-based care coming into play in Texas, they're taking over the ongoing services for much of the state over a period of time. Eventually, it'll be all of the state because the legislative mandate came back a few legislative sessions ago, but it's going to take a while to implement. So when children go missing from Region 1, obviously, Region 1 is not near anything, right? So they'll get these cases. Well, the community-based care and the state, when it comes to placement options, a lot of times these children are placed where there's more people, where there's more services, where there's more residential treatment centers and programs. So, for instance, 6A, down around the Houston area, there's a lot of providers that can provide that residential treatment care or foster care or housing or whatever. So when children that the legal county is in Region 1, say, Parker County or something, and the child is in Region 6 and the child leaves placement from Region 6, it doesn't make sense for the guy from Region 1 to go down there. So Region 6 special investigators, we don't have units identified as such, but we do have units of people that specialize in locating our missing kids and our trafficked children. So they'll work together. The reason we don't just give it to Region 6 is the next time the child's placed might be in Bexar County, which is San Antonio in Region 8. So the continuity and the relationship building with the child just makes sense that the special investigator that's primarily responsible for locating the child is the same. So for instance, special investigator Region 1, child placed in Region 6A, that child goes missing. He or she starts working on what's going on, social media checks, family checks, attorneys checks. They ad litems. We have guardian ad litems and attorney ad litems for the children, CASA workers, and they'll start kind of being the central of what's going on. And we'll reach down to Region 6A and have a special investigator go by the placement. Hey, what was happening before the child went missing? Who did they go missing with? And try to find some stuff. And then, of course, check common areas that the children recovered from. And when the child gets recovered, the special investigator is able to go do a recovery interview with the child. We try to keep that continuous as well. But if the placement falls apart where they were in 6A and then they go to 8, then kind of the same situation happens. We get the special investigators in Region 8 that also specialize in locating children in trafficking cases and doing recovery interviews. We'll engage down there and try to keep that continuous as well. So kind of gives an overview of how it works. The public data from 22 as it relates to our children that go missing from care, the numbers are on the screen there. When you look at the unique number of children, that 1,334, over 300 staff, that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but some of these children run 3 or 4 times in a day. So it is a concentrated effort amongst a portion of my staff to continue looking for these children. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? We can, but you're echoing a little bit. Now you're muted, Damaris.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Are you two in the same space?
Just use my speaker and microphone.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I know that was very
Oh,
quick.
you're echoing again. It's not quite as maybe use Greg's.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
How's this?
Oh,
Perfect.
that's better.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties over here. So I know Greg went through that pretty quickly. I know we were short on time, but I wanted to highlight just the amount of time and the resources it takes to locating a missing youth. And Greg is right. The resources, if you have a youth in one area going to another area, is very vast. But also just kind of highlighting the importance of the dedication and commitment that our special investigators have to finding these youth. And I shared with Jordan and Brian the other day just a story to highlight just some of the process. As you know, there's when a kid goes missing from care, there's lots of notifications that have to happen within certain amounts of times, including the courts, obviously. And so, but one of the things that they're so committed to is, obviously ensuring the safety of this child. And there was this one particular youth who ran from a particular location in Texas who was very sick. She was diabetic. And when she ran, she didn't take her diabetes medication with her. So there was significant concern for her medical well-being, but also there were concerns around trafficking. So you compound all those layers and the sense of urgency. And this is also kind of highlights the importance of communication with the ongoing staff. Ongoing staff have to communicate with our team very pertinent information that is critical to finding this youth. In this particular situation, she was a teenager, diabetic, and so time was of the essence. The legal county was like in Austin. We tracked her to Houston, to Dallas, to Oklahoma at one point. We were pinging phones. There were like 30 special investigators, tons more law enforcement agencies across Texas and Oklahoma. We found her within 24 to 48 hours. And she was sent to the hospital immediately because her sugar levels were significantly high and she would have died. And so we all know what happens when a youth in our care dies as well, just the scrutiny and the challenges and what could we have done more? And so I highlight that because it doesn't just take one person or one member of the team. It really takes coordination and communication from all our stakeholders. And that just gives credence to the work that our team does, the relationships that our team has with law enforcement agency at the local, state, and federal level, but also internally with our community-based care organizations across Texas and our ongoing child protective services staff. Communication is critical. It can also be challenging, right? Because sometimes there can be a delay in critical information. But the work that they do has been so helpful in locating these youth. And in the process, unfortunately, they've identified human trafficking rings. So there's that whole criminal component aspect of it, and the efforts that it takes to put a lot of these people behind bars for the things that they do to kids. But I hope that paints a good picture of the work that Texas is doing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Want to open up the floor to our subcommittee members to see, what clarifying questions you have. I've been jotting down a few. But just want to see what clarifying questions you have, or just information that you think would be helpful informing this group on policies and practice in Texas.
I have one.
Great, thank you, Janelle.
It's more of a clarifying question. I just want to make sure I heard it right. Did you say you have a less than 100 employees for the entire state of Texas?
No, I have about 300 when I'm fully staffed.
That's still so low.
Yeah,
But
that's just for
yeah.
our division, but what it is
Oh, okay. That's what I was
I-
trying to clarify. I was like, oh my gosh.
yeah, that's special investigators across the state. And it kind of to compare it to like our game wardens, for instance, they have less than twice as many as we do, and they cover the whole state. And they have the same difficulty. But if they weren't specialized in doing what they were doing, how difficult of a job would that be for everybody else? So for our approximately 300 staff, we're able to focus on certain things. And the missing children is, I mean, it's just, even if there wasn't the scrutiny like Maurice was talking about, it's still important. And it is very important we follow we locate these children. Typically, the children that run, they're either running to something or from something. And I'd like to think that they're running away from a good environment to something that's not so great. So we need to find them and we need to get them back into care.
Thank you. I see Beth's hand up, and then is it Jenna? I'm sorry, you were muted. Is it Jenna or Jana?
Jana.
Jana, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what training do you provide your investigators surrounding engaging with youth and high-risk youth?
So there's a couple of ways looking at it. Like some of them bring a great amount of experience from their law enforcement career when it comes to communicating. Because I've been a police officer for 24 years now. I left full-time law enforcement to come to work for DFPS literally 10 years ago. And I realized that when I can talk to people in family violence situations or in violent encounters and create that sense of calm that needs to be there, it kind of something police officers and peace officers in general kind of have that social work aspect when it comes to communication. Not all of them, but the ones I like to pick are. And then we have our some training through our like our academy of sorts when it comes in. And then we are big about working with our coalitions. Like we have part of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition. We have just coalitions all across the state, and their roundtable meetings. You just get to learn as you go. As far as formal training, there's some work being done on some like motivational interviewing. Trying to get that into practice, something continuous across the state, because that comes into play with our recovery interviews. I think y'all might have received our resource guides about when the children go missing, and then what the recovery. And if you notice on one of the pages, it kind of has like a topics to cover that's not meant to be a checklist, but we find sometimes it is being utilized as such. So we engage that process and say, hey, you need to cover these topics in a conversational way. And then I have some people who can find anybody, but they don't communicate very well when they encounter the youth. So we team them up with somebody who can. Specific trainings, engagement. We have engagement training, but as far as anything I could just put a name and title to and share, I don't know what that would be.
Thank you. Jana?
That was basically my question as well. I could see the advantage of hiring ex-law enforcement people, but it seems like there would be a little bit of a concern there as well, because these kids kind of come from a different place. So I was concerned about training as well.
We find, and I'm being very honest, I know I'm being recorded, but I find that sometimes the youth will actually engage with the special investigators because we're not mom and dad, right? The caseworker is responsible to make sure they go to school, that they brush their teeth, that they go get their well child care, and that they go to bed on time. They do all this stuff, and then we might be the one that engages with them in when they're not in their best place at the time. that's kind of worked out real good. Well, they'll call my special investigators directly while they're on a missing event and say, "Hey, I'm in San Antonio and I'm hungry. Can you come get me?" And we encourage that. We encourage that connection, if you will. So like where mom and dad sometimes child might have trouble communicating, but they might communicate better with their auntie. It's kind of a kind of hard to back that up with any kind of data, but it does work and it does happen that way. And then we also, we don't just hire everybody that comes in the door. When they do come in, you'll find a lot of folks that have extensive careers in investigations, and they know when you're talking to victims or perpetrators or witnesses that it's not a checklist interview; it's a communication.
Thank you, Greg. I know Jordan had a question.
Yeah, thank you. When we spoke earlier this week, I was just wondering if you could speak to, because part of what this group has been working through is this notion of urgency when a youth runs away from care or goes missing. And we kind of hit this juxtaposition of it doesn't necessarily qualify for the traditional law enforcement definition. Sergeant Cotter, please jump in here if I'm misstating it, of a missing person. So the response may be very different as opposed to how your unit can respond with that sense of urgency that maybe would correlate with a missing person's missing.
Sure.
Does that make sense, Greg? I kind of,
Yes.
if you could talk on that, I think that might be helpful context as well.
Right. We did. Yeah, we discussed that, and it's a great idea. So in Texas, and it's a little different in each state. I mean, we have Amber Alert across the state, and the alerts are starting to get watered down, I think, because we have Silver Alert, Blue Alerts, Clear Alerts, and we have all these things. And so your phone goes off when you're trying to watch a movie or something. I think it's getting dismissed. But more importantly, though, is in Texas, for instance, the Department of Public Safety manages the Amber Alert system. So if we have, let's say, a child goes missing, and there's not what do you take, an articulable immediate danger to the child, or we don't have any information that would assist in locating the child, a vehicle description, a name, a license plate, sometimes even a direction of travel. There's nothing. It won't qualify for the Amber Alert. So when we get started on the process, the caseworker will be notified. We'll be notified, and we start working on it as soon as we know about it. The legislature this last year, they passed, and before my computer restarted on me, I had it pulled up, but 63009 of our Code of Criminal Procedure identifies what law enforcement is supposed to do when a child goes missing. And before it used to, it was a very specific, broad statement about you need to locate the child. And if you're not making efforts, you could be called before the Attorney General's office with a writ of mandamus. What they've done is they've narrowed it down. So law enforcement has 2 hours to get the child into National Crime Information Center and broadcast within a 200-mile range that the child's gone missing. That wasn't always the case. And once upon a time, when I was rolling and patrolling in my law enforcement days, if I had a runaway report, it was the third time I dealt with this child in a recent amount of time, I might not have taken it as serious as I did once I understood, as I grew in age and experience and understanding of what these children, they might be literally running from something. So it became more important. So in the middle of the night or on the weekend, law enforcement wasn't always quick to engage in the third time that the child ran away this week. Now they're having to enter the child missing, and they're having to do that broadcast, but it doesn't really go beyond that. So the special investigators, through relationship buildings, we talk cop. I mean, that's the basic fundamentals of it. So if we call the reporting officer and say, hey, I'm a retired detective from so-and-so, I'm assigned this case, let me do the work, but be available to me, or I'll appreciate all the work that you can do. We get that communication going pretty quickly. And by doing so, you make new friends, you make new contacts, and those conversations it's not like a cold call anymore. The more you communicate with your missing persons unit, in some areas of the state, I have SIs that are in the missing person units at law enforcement, so they can have those hallway conversations and things like that. So getting the ball rolling right away is very important. And in places where the agencies are kind of strapped, they don't have a lot of personnel, a lot of times we can do a little bit of the work the legwork on it and then say, hey, I got a license plate, and then law enforcement who's assigned the case run the license plate and give us another leg up on trying to locate the child. And then our special investigators, although some of us still do it on the side, we're not peace officers for the state. We're not peace officers for DFPS. So we're not writing search warrants. We're not doing those kind of things that law enforcement has the ability to do. We will encourage the caseworkers and their chain of command. And it's in our resource guide. They're supposed to get a writ of attachment for the child. I'm sure that's universal language, but essentially that's the judge saying, committing the constable or sheriff to go take possession of this child and deliver the child where it's indicated on there. And in some instances, we've got to help them write the affidavit and encourage the county or district attorney that's managing the case for us to include making forced entry into the residence, because sometimes law enforcement is a little hesitant to do that without that court order telling them that they can do so. Sometimes it's so much as you'll see when the order comes out, it says go to a specific address and force entry if you have to and get these children. And then the next time we do that, after a conversation, you'll see the order read at this address or anywhere the child is known to be. And that's a pretty powerful instrument, the writ of attachment is. So then we have to have the special investigator sometimes be able to explain what that is to local law enforcement. In Texas, anyways, a municipal police officer can't enforce a court order like that. So you have to get a deputy to come into the downtown Austin area to help you with that, or Dallas or wherever, or a constable. So we do a lot of legwork to try to get everybody to communicate, work together to recover the child. Now, when we were first talking the other day, we're looking at, what are we doing to keep the children from leaving placement? Well, that's difficult. But the part that we handle in that is when we do these recoveries and recovery interviews, and we're talking to the child about why they ran. If they identify something that's happened at the treatment center or foster home or something, that's a great opportunity for us to pursue that. If it's something as small as like, oh, they won't let me stay out after 10 or whatever, well, then that's one of those conversations like, hey, do your best thing. There's benefits to being in foster care and being safe and things like that. But, obviously if it's a problem with a placement center, then we call in a case, and residential child care investigations might investigate it. So that's our part, is we're on the back end of at least that first run event before we get into any kind of prevention.
Is your unit only involved when the child is in some kind of out of home placement and the state has custody?
No. Well, if the state has taken custody of the children, TMC or PMC child, we are absolutely responsible for locating them. But we also work on traditional investigations when, for instance, the family's avoiding the caseworker coming to the door, and they're on the run. We get very involved in locating those children, because sometimes they're very young children. And in your research, you might have come across the child safety check alert list information out of Texas. You can Google it by the Colton-Turner's Law or Colton's Law. And initiated a process where if kids are not in the legal status of the state and they go missing and they're with a caregiver or any adult, we can enter a TCIC state, Texas state only entry that stays in place for a year, and that allows law enforcement some detention authority to locate those children too. So we do get some cases where the child has come into say, family-based safety services, and then the child goes missing because mom comes and picks up the kiddo from grandma's house where they were in a parental child safety placement and goes on the run. Well, they're not in Texas anyways. You can't kidnap your own child, right? So your rights haven't been terminated, and infringed. The state doesn't have custody. So we'll do a child safety check alert list entry, and the special investigators manage that entire process. We communicate directly with the Department of Public Safety for the entry of that. So we don't involve law enforcement until we get it entered, and then we let everybody we know be on look for this vehicle this mom or whatever. And with the technology of license plate readers, things like that, we can get a hit on a Cisco entry pretty easy.
Awesome, thank you. What other questions? I have a whole list, so I can jump in with more questions, but what other questions do subcommittee members have?
Can you talk more about the recovery interviews and what that looks like? And if you use like child advocacy centers and forensic interviewers or?
So yes, so we, in those forms, you've seen the topics that we're covering. That is the bare bones minimum things that we need to know. Like what did you have to do to survive while you were away from placement? We cover those. We have a human trafficking division here at DFPS, and they are working on a lot of, well, for instance, that resource guide is getting a workover on what that's going to look like, and then in interviews. So the special investigation program directors, the frontline supervisors for the SIs, they're reading these cases, and then if they start to see room for improvement, that's exactly what we're doing. Mentoring our staff to have good, engaged interviews. And we have some special investigators, like in Region 6, for instance. This is what they do, and so they make those engagements with the kids. So, it says we need to do a recovery interview in Texas or anywhere. We can't make the children talk to us, right? So if we go in there and they're still coming down, if they're on substances or just anxiety or whatever, and they tell us where to go, we do. But then now we're coming back and trying to re-engage them for that conversation, not just taking no for an answer. Respectful of their rights, of course, but if they're like, I don't want to talk to you, okay, well, can I take your picture? No, you can't take my picture. Okay, well, you have a good evening. You need anything? I'm probably gonna be back in a day or two. You want me to bring you anything? And sometimes that's as simple as a Dr. Pepper or something like that. And then we come back and try to engage with you. The caseworker also, primary caseworker for the child, also has to make contact with the child in that period of time as well. So although I wish we were farther along the evolution of things, we're getting there about that communication. As far as child advocacy centers, they're all individually run across the state, and sometimes they're just not available either due to capacity. Ideally, if there's any indication the child's been exposed to trafficking, or even if they were, abuse or neglect, we do try to get them in for a forensic interview. But it just depends. It really depends on each situation. It's not yet a checklist item, because it being a statewide thing, it's hard for me to tell my folks that they need to do this, schedule a forensic interview in case the child will go. And the capacity for the CACs is really not fair. And we don't have our own forensic interviewers, because that kind of gets rid of the whole neutrality of having a CAC program. But it is a topic that's discussed. Now, if there's any kind of allegation of trafficking or criminal component to it, law enforcement sometimes will be like, hey, let me call the CAC. I want to get this done. And that happens a little quicker. And then we also have to be aware that the children do have legal representation. So if they were involved in the criminal stuff, and I'm not talking about trafficking, if they were carjacking people and stuff like that, we have to be aware of that before we schedule those interviews, because their attorneys obviously aren't going to want them to implicate themselves in a criminal act. Jen has a question.
I was just getting ready to call on her.
Oh, I kind of piggybacking on what Beth said, because I don't know what's going on with my computer, but I can't see the sheet you were talking about. And you said that those are the minimum things. Does that show like minimal facts, or is it more like an HRV tool that we have?
I think Jordan had pulled those documents, the public documents. I imagine she can share with you. It's all public information. We have two guides locating missing children. One is for all of Texas, and then one is for our big five. Like Travis County, which is where Austin is, Harris County, which is where Houston is. They have a different guide, but that's because we're using the See It tool in those areas.
So you guys do not have like a high risk victim tool or anything like that. Anything like that you kind of go through to be able to identify trafficking or any high risk factors when they come back in on recovery from being on the run.
Yeah, that would be the See It tool. A lot of states are using it, so if you aren't,
Okay.
then so
Thank you.
CSE IT. It's from West Coast, but it is a screening tool, and our governor was a big proponent of that tool, and we use it here in Texas. And in most of our advocacy groups, RTCs, juvenile probation, juvenile justice, they're using that See It tool as well to screen for these children. And we capture our records management system is called Impact, and that's where everything EFPS is involved is captured. And if there's sexual victimization, we capture that and we record it. And then if there's trafficking incidents, we capture that as well. So in the big five, they call it, we do that on every recovery interview. And then the conservatorship supervisors do it for every child that comes into care.
Thank you, Jenna.
Greg, I was just wondering, if your investigators find a child and the child refuses to come, what is your procedure? How much force do you use? Do you need to involve law enforcement? What do you do to make sure they go with you?
That is my favorite question so far. So not being peace officers for the state, and being the social services agency we're not going to put our hands on children. One, that doesn't do much for the next encounter for the child, but we also remember that child is a victim at the beginning of when they come into our care. So we're very careful about that. Law enforcement, when the child's missing, and the child's been missing more than X amount of times, and they become a high danger missing child or whatever, and they respond, depending where we're at. And there's each county and each judicial district, they have different requirements for the juvenile detention. So if, for instance, I'm in Travis County and we locate the child and the police officer comes out and the child's a runaway and the child's like, no, I'm not going with you, period, they're going to be like, if you know where your kid is, they're not missing. Right? That's a phrase I used back in the day when I was rolling and patrolling. Child's not missing. If you know where they are, you need to be a parent. Well, that's what we get. That's what we have to contend with. So sometimes we have to be creative and talk the child into going somewhere that they feel safe or whatever. However, when we get the writ of attachment for cases where we know we're going to come across that, then the constable or sheriff can detain the child and then bring them to an office, and that might give them some time to cool off. And by detention, that could just be get in the car, or that might be handcuffed or whatever. But that's on the law enforcement side. We don't necessarily advocate or tell them how to do their job. It is a hurdle for us. We literally, and you might categorize the same way, an unauthorized placement. Well, even by declaring it an unauthorized placement, it almost sounds like we accept the fact that the child's somewhere we don't authorize them to be. And that's probably the perception from the outside looking in too. It's not the case, but at least we know where they are. So if the child wants to stay at mom's house, for instance, maybe mom lost her rights 5 years ago or whatever, and when the child runs away, she's at mom's house and refuses to leave, law enforcement won't help us. We have to figure out what we have to do to maintain that child is safe. Sometimes that's having the conversation. Now, if you go up the highway few counties north to McLennan County, for instance, and the child is on active runaway, they will detain the child. They will take the child to juvenile detention, and it's that officer's decision on what they need to do. And then, we have status offenses for children in Texas because until they turn 17, it's not a criminal offense, it's a civil action. So they'll have like status offenses, might be a ticket, and then child in need of supervision. If they determine the child's in need of supervision because they run away and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing while they're gone, the law enforcement officer can detain the child at juvenile detention and get them into juvenile probation system right away. and the judges can have a lot of influence on what happens with that child. And then there's, in Texas anyways, within 3 days, we have initial detention hearing with the judge, and then every 10 days after that, so they figure out what's best for the child. We do have some areas in Texas anyways where we will, the child will be detained because of a criminal allegation, and they're out of detention that same afternoon, released to CPS.
So
I don't
at
know if there's another way.
what point, I was a little unclear, at what point are the police, are they always with you when you
Oh, no.
you call them when you've located somebody, or only if they refuse, or how do you get them?
So sometimes they come across them in the course of their business. Last night, pedestrian stop, whatever, they come across them, or we get them information, we call them up, say, hey, I think the child's at such address, and they'll go out there. They'll call us to take possession of the child. A lot of times, for instance, of just Austin, I mean, I work right here. It's a beautiful little city and everything, but they are really strapped on responding to non-priority calls and recovering a 17-year-old that's listed as a missing child is nowhere near the family violence calls and everything that they're responding to. So they're not probably going to come out. So sometimes we'll pick up the child, we'll take the child to the office or meet the caseworker or whatever, and we'll call law enforcement and they can clear the child out of NCIC for us. Sometimes they don't even respond to the scene because we already have a relationship with law enforcement and they know that we know where our child is. So it's not every time. And I'll tell you, you know, Texas is a big place. Just in Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, Arlington area, I think there's 79 law enforcement agencies in that county. So depending on what side of the street you are, determines who you're going to call to get that assistance. And if you're in the cities, sometimes there's a big delay on getting that kind of assistance. Now you go more rural, yeah, you know, you might go have lunch with a deputy and then go drive by a couple addresses, locate the child, and recover the child that way. There's not an absolute. And let me throw this in there. So the Texas Highway Patrol, Department of Public Safety, they are amazing when we get information. So, you know, they're rolling the highways, they're responding to wrecks, writing tickets, and doing those kind of things. Sometimes their availability is a little bit more, and our game wardens too. Like we think families hiding out in a state park, phone a friend, they might drive around and say, oh yeah, hey, there's a red truck here, and come by here, we'll go make the approach. So it's so different, like an every day with every case on what that response looks like.
Are your partnerships or relationships with law enforcement more informal, or do you have any memoranda of understanding or sort of formalized?
Like MOUs?
Yeah.
We do where we have the trafficking coalition. So Texas is implementing, and it's been a slower process than expected, the care coordination team response. I think that's got a fire lit underneath it. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly. But where we do have those, we do have the regular set of detectives that investigate trafficking, for instance. Might call them before we call somebody else, just because sometimes the two topics run together with the missing children and the trafficking. And we get that in there. But as far as a standardized response to our need, every time, you know, yeah, our policies allow. There was a back away. We have a very open conversation between law enforcement and DFPS. So if we're working a joint investigation, which we do on anything that's major, we can have their information and they can have ours, and it's not a matter of sending open records request. It says we might not give them the hard copy of the report because there's some identifying information for reporters and stuff. But we can share that information, like, hey, this is where this person's known to be, or this is what we've learned through our interviews, or this is what mom and dad have to say about what's going on.
Thank you. What other questions do subcommittee members have?
I wanted to ask, you talked about obviously communication being a barrier, and our group has certainly discussed that. Can you share any insight as to like how you've overcome those barriers with certain organizations to ensure that communication flow is working?
Greg 101, go to their meetings, invite them to yours, and then do lunch afterwards. I mean, that's really what it is, because we tend to get siloed in our disciplines, right? About what we do. Oh, hey, law enforcement's not doing this. I can't get anybody to call me back. And it's usually like, hey, let me check my number. Oh, hey, call this guy. He'll talk to you. You know, that's only because I know that guy, and I might only know him from going to MDTs or coalitions or meetings like this, where you have somebody to contact, and it's it's always better in person when you get to have those kind of communication, that kind of, like I say, lunch. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens over lunch when you figure it out. When you say, hey, call me if you need me. That's my favorite phrase. And you do. You take them up on it. Well, you use my microphone.
Hi, can y'all hear me pretty well? Okay,
Yep.
great. You know, communication is so critical in everything we do. The other piece to that is it's so important to have an understanding of what each other's limitations are. Every agency has a very specific goal, right? And sometimes we cannot operate outside of those boundaries. And so what I find is sometimes we want to push, right, and challenge that status quo, which is fine. But I think having a good understanding of what our stakeholders are able to do and not do is so key in this as well. So that we can free up resources, right, where we need to, or not tie up resources if we don't need to. So I think those two things go hand in hand.
Totally agree. So one of the things that you talked about in your presentation was the all of the different ways in which you support DFPS, or which your special investigators in your department supports DFPS, which includes but it's not limited to youth who run away from care or youth who are missing. And so what would you say is the percentage or share of work that's really focused on youth who run away from care versus those other functions?
I guess it depends what time it is or what day. For instance, here in Region 7 in Central Texas, I have two SIs that come from a great background, and they enjoy finding these kids. They enjoy interacting with them, and they enjoy working with the caseworkers who probably a little bit younger in their career, to help them learn as they go. And I might have 8 missing children in Region 7. That's manageable. Now, if that number starts to jump up, I bring somebody else in. In Houston, I have like 7 that's their job, is the missing children. And a lot of that has to do because there's so many kids that are from out of the area that might leave placement in Houston. But it's not limited to those 7. So we keep the people that are special at doing that. And then as the numbers come up, we bring some more in it. I don't like drawing lines in the sand when it comes to our children's safety. So if we need to add some to it, we absolutely will. And we did a recent project where we helped traditional investigation, CPI, close a bunch of cases that were going into backlog. And that became a big focus because there's families. Every one of these cases has a family tied to it. So the child safety was so important. So even by doing that, dedicating a lot to that, we carved out a piece of our staff to leave behind to find the kids. So in Tarrant County, for instance, again, Fort Worth, Arlington, some big cities all mixed up around there, I had 3. Two that were full-time monitoring this, and another one that was come and go. But those individuals were on Spotlight, checking some information that they had to follow up with. They were doing social media searches. They were working it like day and night to do that, to keep up so we didn't fall behind. And if that number got up to 15, then the number 3 guy, that's all he was doing. So it's fluid. I would love to have enough FTEs to just devote to that on a full-time basis. Because in law enforcement or here, if you don't have anything to do, it's a really good day because there's always something that needs to be done. We're just not there yet, and I don't know that we will be. Kids we have a consistent pool of clients that are going to come through historically, anyways. There's always going to be somebody that needs us to look after them.
Thank you. So I know that we have a couple members of our task force who represent law enforcement in Colorado. And one, I just want to not to call anyone out, but just to just see if there are any specific questions that they have about the implementation of this unit in Texas. And also, as we think about what could be adapted to Colorado, to what extent, Texas approach, would be well received or not by law enforcement and others in the state of Colorado. So would love to hear from our law enforcement representatives on just sort of, what's sitting with you, what's resonating with you, what you think might be especially challenging, and to what extent they've encountered those issues in Texas.
Well, I'll jump in on that. I think first of all, I love the idea. I love the idea of having a group that's dedicated to a lot of these efforts, and it really feels like Texas has created a group to liaison with law enforcement, which I think is a phenomenal partnership that we could learn from. And I can see a lot of what Greg was saying, a lot of the similarities between us and them with the liaisoning between, or the communication between law enforcement and human services, trying to get them to talk to each other and being in silos. So I think the experience that he's conveying in Texas has a lot of similarities to what we experience here in Colorado. And I would encourage all of us to kind of listen to what he said, just because I think we could grow from it. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
I didn't touch on it earlier, but by the special investigators being a civil investigation component, it's not that law enforcement deal. Now, again, 10 years I've been here, I don't even know who they are. They're not here anymore. They toyed with the idea of commissioning us, the ones that want to be commissioned. The downside of that, and a very valuable argument, is sometimes people will tell me things they won't tell the police, because I tell them right off the bat, hey, this is where I'm at, special investigator, former law enforcement, I'm here to help, whatever. And then there's times where they'll tell the police something that they won't tell their caseworker or DFPS because we're the bad guys. That's one of the things to do, that civil deal, whether you were to take a branch of your government, whatever that might be, that had the oversight and all this. And if it was a law enforcement branch, great. But if it couldn't be, and it was a civil type situation like what we're doing, I'll tell you, it's still effective. I'm a cop before I'm anything else. I bleed blue. I promise you. I can't let it go. It's what I am. But I do see the benefit of sometimes talking to people. And I mean, I'm not afraid to play a card. You guys have only known me for about an hour. But I'll tell them, yeah, I wouldn't talk to the police either. What do you want to tell me? And they do. And we record those interviews. And like I said earlier, that information is shareable with law enforcement. So once we get our detective friends on board, or law enforcement friends, and we're like, hey, we're going to record the interview anyways. Let me have first shot at the kiddo or the parent or Uncle Bobby or whatever the situation is. Sometimes it's beneficial. So I don't know where you guys are at in your development, what you're looking at, what the goal or the objective is. But if you had to figure out a non-law enforcement component, it does work.
So I had a question about, this approach in Texas has been around, I think, from your PowerPoint since 2005. There's been, I'm sure lots of evolution since then in, your department, including, you've probably grown substantially. But I'm curious if you were to, with what you know now, if you were to stand up this program today with all of the lessons learned, what would be some of the things that you think would be absolutely critical to its success?
So the first thing And every new SI that I hire or anybody that I promote, first thing they got to do is make sure that it's not us versus them. So if you were to stand up something like pick somewhere, Colorado, for instance, you were to set something up, you need to start like right away, like, hey, you know, we're the government, we're here to help. It's a little standing joke, but it's true. You know, we help our partners. The caseworkers don't need to be threatened by the fact that we have the law enforcement background. By that, I mean some of my folks have 40 years in law enforcement. That just doesn't go away. So sometimes they talk a little bit different, right? And on the other hand, you got to make sure that that population of special investigators also understand that our caseworkers are here for the right reason, right? They went to college, they came out of college, no telling what their background was like, but they're here to help kids, and they might make mistakes. They might not do it the same way you do it. So that needs to be like right off the bat, just to make sure that we all work together. And then the cops, I'll tell you, we're stubborn. So when we're working with our law enforcement partners, the ones that are part of MDTs, if they're not part of the team when they got there, they usually are soon afterwards, because they get to know each other and they go to lunch together. And you get to work with everybody, all the way to your forensic nurses. Everybody gets to get the whole MDT program is amazing. So you got to approach it the same way. So you've got to educate your law enforcement. You've got to educate everybody that's involved.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Please. So I wanted to jump in because I do not have a law enforcement background. But for whatever reason, Greg wanted me to work for him at some point. So, I speak child welfare, right? I've been on the ongoing side of the house, as well as investigations, and now in the Special Investigations Division. And so I was around when we first got our very first special investigators. And the lessons learned question is one of my favorites, because looking back at the evolution of it and all the things that we've learned along the way and the way we've grown, I want to share this, and I hope you guys hear it, that the skill set and the knowledge that our special investigators bring to the table is so valuable. And we need to hear them, right? You know, they're experienced, some of them are retired, so they come with leadership experience already at the local, state, and federal level. And so our staff aren't coming in, you know, at 24 years old, straight out of college. They're coming in with a wealth of knowledge, and we need to lean on that. We all have different teams under us. And each team requires something different. And so in the very same way in this case, this team requires different things and different resources. And just to be able to lean on that and hear what they have to say is very critical.
It all kind of goes together. She was here when the SIs began being SIs, and like initially they reported to the investigations units. Well, CPS didn't know what to do with them at first. They're like, okay, we'll go with the caseworker and learn what we do. And there was some reassigned caseloads. There were some things that weren't really utilizing us to the best of our ability, I think, and that evolved into what it is now. So like what it is now, if you were to stand up something new, you've got to allow for a lot of latitude that's not comfortable to the traditional casework stuff, right? Like whether it's social media access, whether it's the fact that sometimes the conversations are kind of blunt, being a cop, you know, that happens, but over time we soften up a little bit. But I think that understanding is how best go into it. It's a different group of people. But I would say this though, I wouldn't water down the requirements just to get people in the seats. I would make sure that you're hiring people with the experience. Our experience right now, you know, 5 years as a peace officer, at least an intermediate license. It's all based on the fact that by the time you've been a police officer for 5 years and you've had these trainings and you have this stuff, that you're pretty competent in your role. Not just because they were graduated police academy. That's not necessarily who we need. And pay them a lot of money.
You said that without a smile.
Just saying, you get what you pay for.
Thank you. Do you think that that legislative changes and, sort of some of the like pen to paper requirements were key levers in, both making this unit possible and also the evolution of the I'm going to call it a program, but in order for it to be successful?
So I think most of us are in government. Things don't get fixed until they're broke, right? I wasn't here when they applied this fix to it, but I've been here since it's evolved and gotten stronger. And what we've done, we've had some really good leadership over the years, and they identify a need. Okay, well, sometimes by default they'll be like, oh, the SIs have time to do that. Okay, well, we'll try that, and when that doesn't work, then maybe we get retasked with something else. But I think it was identified the skill set, the missing children. I mean, it's kind of what most of this is about. The kids that are on a run. It's like, who knows how to talk? Who's not afraid to work after 5? Who's willing to sit on surveillance? Who's willing to answer their phone after 5? Right, that's a big deal. Some of the kiddos that actually I'm most fond of gave me a lot of headaches. 11 o'clock phone calls. Greg, I told you I was going to check in, and I didn't. I didn't want you to be mad at me. I said, I'm not going to get mad at you. What are you doing? You want me to come get you? Oh, no, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'll call you in the morning. You sure? Yeah, you talk to your caseworker. She won't answer my phone calls. Okay, well, just call me back if you need me type deal. Just you have to be able to have some ownership of the task. That's really what I'm saying. So if you're going to bring somebody in, whomever that is, allow them some latitude to handle that. I've out-of-pocketed, I don't know how many meals for kids when I would go out there, or my partners would go out there, because we don't have a resource for that. Right? If they're in care, you can buy them a meal, get reimbursed. I'm not worried about that. I'm sure at some point in my life somebody bought me lunch when I really needed it. So those are the things. So you gotta have a lot of latitude for that position.
Awesome, thank you. What other questions do our committee members have? We have a wealth of knowledge here. Want to make sure that we maximize it. Jordan?
I know I'm not a member. Do you mind if I? Okay.
I did not mind.
Just curious, Greg, you've talked about the special relationship between a child or youth and the special investigator. Is the first contact between the special investigator and the youth after they run from care, or do you kind of do a proactive contact when they're placed in out-of-home care?
No, they really don't come in onto our radar until all the traditional methods, placement, and all that. We don't have anything proactive. I mean, we have how many thousands of kids in care on any given day. Maybe someday. It just doesn't fit right now. We do have some kids that come into care that are higher needs, and they might be located where other children are that we are engaged with. But other than just the casual, how you doing, or what are you doing here, or whatever, there's really nothing in place to even really encourage it. I mean, these kids all have different needs and different expectations, and sometimes being overstimulated is not the first option by meeting all these new people every day.
Thank you. Jenna?
So, besides social media, what are your resources, your go-to resources that the investigators will find information to locate the child?
Family is a big one, because there's a guy here. He's a wonderful guy. He's one of our fatherhood specialists, and he opens his meetings and closes meetings. If you need to find me, find my mama, right? She'll know where I am. Those are true words. And you extend that to the grandparents and aunts and uncles, adult siblings, boyfriend or girlfriend's parents. You talk to everybody, and that's what you do. And you drop a lot of business cards. The attorney ad litem appointed by the court, and the guardian ad litem appointed by the court. Some of them take bigger ownership than others. And those that do prove to be an asset. And sometimes that means picking up the attorney ad litem and you put them in the car with you and go somewhere. It doesn't happen as often as I'd like to because they too have a big caseload, I'm sure. And the caseworkers, when the caseworkers are invested, and they'll text the kids or the parents or whatever, and that. So like you could list all the resources, and for each kid you would use different resources each time. Social media is a big one. That's how they communicate. You don't have to have a cell phone. You just have to have Wi-Fi access and sit in front of any business that has free Wi-Fi, and then they communicate that way. So it's just a little different. And that goes back to the question earlier, just allow whoever it is, whether it's a special investigator or even your caseworkers, all the latitude to use everything that's available to them, and remind them to stay within the parameters of law. If your policies are so strict on social media or whatever, we're hobbling somebody for no reason. I don't think, when there's not much more important things in my world than child safety.
Jana, one of the biggest resources as well, in addition to family, is we have access to our food stamp office, and that's huge, right? Our families eat, they have to eat, and so we're able to have access to that database and track down addresses or where they locations where they last used the food stamp office, and then a wealth of websites out there, free websites as well. That are easily accessible.
Just having that latitude to do everything. So you might start down a trail and you're like, well, I think they're staying with Kim. Okay, what's Kim's last name? Let's figure it out. Let me go back to this old Facebook deal, check friends, look at all the Kims. Okay, well, here's one that's probably related, like boyfriend's best friend's mom or something. Okay, now I'm going to go check and see where she's using her food stamps. Well, all of a sudden, she's on the other side of the state in a resort area, right? Maybe they're visiting down around Galveston. So, hey, guys, check this out. I think she might be the deal. She's been using her food stamps every day at 3:00 at 7-Eleven. We call that a lead, and we need to have that lateral and that ability to go find that.
You didn't mention schools. Are schools not really in touch, or are they?
So most of the kids in that population, some go to school because they need that social experience, right? And the schools are very helpful. But again, we go talk to the school resource officers or somebody that speaks what we speak and get those understandings of what's going on.
Awesome, thank
But
you.
I tell our folks, and I do some trainings with DPS and things like that. I'm like, you need to look for these kids like they're your kids, right? If you don't like your kids, look for them like you're looking for somebody that owes you money, right? And do everything you can to go find them. And as long as we give them the tools to do that, it tends to work out for us.
Thank you, Greg. Janelle, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a few things. I love that you guys have access to the food stamp stuff. I know that when kids are missing out here, not everybody has access to that. And so, you have to make relationships with people that can pull that stuff to try to figure out what is going on with them so they can be recovered. And then 2, I guess it comes back to the legislation thing that was asked about, did that help with getting passed? Because we don't have stuff like what you have out here. I don't know if it's a resource thing or all of money thing, whatnot. I personally think it's wonderful that you guys are able to put all that time and resources into recovering kids, because out here they have to meet a certain threshold, and more often than not, they don't meet it. And more often than not, those are the kids that need it the most, in my opinion. And so it turns into kind of a crapshoot real quick. I know that you said that you were around at the end, you weren't necessarily in this position at that time, but what were the steps taken for you guys to get something like this?
Good question. Basically what that boiled down to was the evolution of some leadership, right? So when you're in government, whether it's the small town police department or city works or whatever, there's always decision makers in place. So over the last decade or so, there's been a lot of attention. And when the question is, why are we not looking for the kids? Well, somebody had to answer that. And if I had to guess, it probably wasn't well received. I don't know doesn't work, right? So they had to retool and identify the tools that we had already to work with. And we go back to about late 2016 into 2017, they realized that the special investigators needed more staff, and they gave us 100 new FTEs for the SI division, and also 10 new FTEs for SIPD position. And that, I don't mind saying that probably followed some events that I don't know about, right? There was probably something in place, something that said, "Oh crap, something's broke, we got to fix it," and then that happened. So as we move forward by doing the job that we're doing, the manner we do it, our run events are substantially less than what they used to be. When you do the basic math, some people run three times a day. That's going to bring back the length of run from the other end. But when we have kids that are missing for 30 days or 60 days, there's going to be two reasons for it. One, they really don't want to be found, or whoever's working on that's not doing the best work they could do. So that's where that first line and second line supervisors and, for instance, Don Maurice tracks these things. If we're starting to have some longer run events, then we got to step up our game and maybe throw some more people at it or call in a favor. For instance, we have some officers, we have some SIs that are associated well with our fusion center. We'll go down the fusion center, talk to the buddy that you already know, and say, "Hey, what else can you help me with this?" And then they start doing some offline searches and things like that to help out. So I don't know what the trigger was each step of the way. I just know that every time there's been a change, the purpose has been to do a better job.
I think that's really good. The difference here is Colorado's a very different state than Texas, and you guys get I'm trying to think of a good adjective. You get more when it comes to latitude, obviously, when it comes to youth and things like that. And so you just get a lot more discretion, and here you don't. And so that makes things really hard. I guess I'm just wondering for follow-up if, I don't know, I'd be interested to see how that happened because, I mean, for instance, you have Beth McNally on here right now, and she runs the Denver Juvenile Assessment Center. And when it comes to at least the city of Denver, I mean, there's different ones all over, but that's kind of it when it comes into a place to bring youth. And then you really only have 2 more in the state because the rest have closed down or anything. So you guys have built this army of a place for kids to go and be served and all of that, which is great. But we're diminishing them here in Colorado, which makes it even harder to serve them. And then you have, so I run a nonprofit that is only appointed by law enforcement. And so we do on-scene first responding case management, and then we're that one constant contact that you were kind of talking about, from recovery to sentencing through all of their stuff, because we only work human trafficking. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to those like governmental professional services, I mean, I can barely fill a hand when it comes to who's getting involved in those things to add more, because just like my funds only go so far, so do theirs. And then they have certain protocols that have to be met in order to give those. And so I may have more latitude, but they don't. And it's a lot of limitations, which means a lot of kids not being served or recovered.
One of the benefits of being a state-run system is that we are able to meet with decision makers in other state agencies and build those relationships. And so those other state agencies are able to make decisions once we have the buy-in and the understanding and the communication. For example, our Texas Education Agency, our school system, if we have some concerns on the local level, or we're getting some barriers on the local level of the school districts, we have points of contact with the investigative division at TEA. And so it opens up those doors to resources. And I imagine that we started with a task force appointed by the governor on some level, and that members of the task force were decision makers who had buy-in that were then able to make those decisions at one point in time and to offer up resources within their own state agency. So that's been very helpful because, you know, somebody in Dallas with the missing kid in South Texas can call the school, can call our state agency maybe of the school district and say, hey, can you run down an address in South Texas, without trying to track down a very specific school where we may not have a name. So I can see the challenges for Colorado in that regard as well. And so I don't know what the solution is, but I'm confident that y'all will find a fantastic solution.
I love that you have confidence. That's adorable. No, but thank you for that. And you're right. There's plenty of task forces out here. I guess I'm more interested in the legislation piece, because that is one thing I do in January is work with a couple legislators on both sides of the things to do a lot in legislation, up antes for, you know, maybe people that would purchase children, or procure children for prostitution, things like that, like demand side, all of that. But I'm just wondering where this would fit in. So I guess I'm asking for a follow-up when what that legislation is. If anybody can get a hold of that and send it to me, I would be happy to give it to a research project or a drafter there to see if it could fit in, because whatever we want, there's 10 things already in place that block that thing being able to go through. And so there's a lot more to it than that. So I would actually love to give that a little bit of research so the people in this room and in this movement and, you know, that's working in this population can actually maybe have a chance at resources that they need.
So the in my slides, and I went through kind of quick, Senate Bill 6 from the 79th legislature was authored by Senator Jane Nelson. She's still a sitting senator. As a matter of fact, she's a chair of most of the committees, or involved in most of the committees that have to do with child welfare. She still exists. She might be a resource for you about how it initially came up. Now, keep in mind, in 2005, trafficking wasn't the topic that it is now.
Yeah.
So our duties evolved, but the seed was planted in 2005. And I think there was, when you read the bill, you look at the other sponsors. I don't know if it was Schwertner, maybe Frank, I don't know, but most of those people are still involved in our state government. So it might be some resources for you to draw from.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll look those up. It sounds like Jordan's going to get some stuff because I have zero problem picking up the phone and calling a legislator, like none. So.
Well, they're there to work. And when they start something like this, they probably take some pride in it, and asking about it might actually be an opportunity for them to share what they know. Now, there's days that the legislature loves us, and there's some days that they ask questions. You know, that's going to happen. But I think our program is solid. I think we've done a really good job. I think we're going to do even better job. So I enjoy these kind of conversations.
Thank you. I see we have Beth, and I know we've taken a lot of your time, Greg and Demira. So we appreciate your generosity and you know, and being here, and allowing us to pick your brain so that we can come away and sort of learn lessons learned, and as we think about and approach this topic. Beth, I see that you had your hand up.
Yeah, I want to start by, thank you so much for this. This has been extremely helpful. And I promise this is my last question. You guys talked about when you encounter a youth who's been on the run and maybe they're in crisis mode, or then you identify that they've been a victim. I'm curious what resources or partnerships you guys have established that you could implement immediately in that moment, or if there's some gaps that you wish or you're in the process of working on to kind of provide those resources.
So our care coordination teams that are coming together, matter of fact, I think the ball's rolling better now than it was before. Some of those the idea of that started out with like Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition, which really started, and it's kind of a cool story. Susan Peters, who's now the the executive director of Unbound. I don't know if you know what Unbound is, but it's a worldwide advocacy group for trafficking victims. She came to one of is now one of my special investigation program directors, Kim Clark, when Kim Clark was a detective at Waco Police Department. And she came to her hat in hand and said, "Hey, what can we do to get everybody on the same page?" Well, one conversation led to another, and of course, there was some lunches involved. And then they got to know each other and they created the Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition. Look that up when we get done later. It's a great program. Well, programs like that across the state, the governor called a meeting a few years ago I went to, and they shared like what they know. Like the trafficking coalition in the Dallas area was different than Waco, but people would come over to Waco's table and say, "Hey, tell me how you're doing that. How did you get a district judge buy-in? How do you get the U.S. representatives people at your meetings?" Right? And so that kind of grew. Well, over time, there became some funding and opportunities for care coordination teams across the state. And with anything that you have that's done across the state, it's going to be done differently across the state. So there's a movement right now. So you probably can look at some care coordination resources on that and see how that came together. That's really what happened. So as they grow, then if a child's recovered in McLennan County, for instance, I have one phone call access to everything that I need. We've literally had advocates come out and say, "Hey, what does the child need?" Well, she don't have any clothes. She don't have anything. All right. We can get some stuff, but our rainbow rooms don't really have a lot of clothing for a 16-year-old. So they go to Target and they came back with $700 worth of stuff, to support the child. And then the child was willing to engage with some advocacy services there. She wasn't even from Waco, but she was from like the Dallas area. So they said, "Not a problem. Let me phone a friend in Dallas." And that's what happened. Our human trafficking group is Blanca Denise Lance is the director over that, and she's working with all of the care coordination teams that come together across the state with MOUs. DFPS, our privacy stuff is pretty specific. So when we get into that MDT protocols, we can talk about the case with law enforcement, but we might not be able to talk about a case like that with an advocacy group over here because there still is a law enforcement investigation going on. But when it comes to the needs of the child, that's being addressed head on. Because not all the care coordination team have got off the ground yet. The governor's absolutely probably the biggest supporter of care coordination. But you have a lot of when you have 40 some odd stakeholders in a meeting, you got 50 different perspectives on what's going on. So it's coming together, and that's one resource you could reach out to is like Heart of Texas Human Trafficking Coalition. There's one in Travis County. I don't remember what it's called, but these things are growing. They're taking off, and the idea is that we have a one-stop shop to take care of the child's immediate needs.
Each child is unique when they're recovered in their needs, and it could be some require medical interventions, state exams, or maybe they just need some food, right? And so, and I want to go back to the state-run system and just kind of highlight one of those situations. We had a situation where Youth in Care, she would run multiple times. She was in a very dangerous situation, being trafficked, and when she was located, she required some medical attention and a state exam, and so we had to take some extreme measures to convince her to be placed in another location, and we relied heavily on one of these coalitions and one of the placements that specialized in human trafficking of girls. And so because of the relationship, we had some barriers that it took us a couple of days, but I go back, we just had to take some extreme measures. But because of the relationships and because of our partners who have these nonprofits, we couldn't have put her in a safe situation. And we scoured all across the state, right? In a state as big as Texas. It was a very unique situation. But our nonprofit partners are so key in the success of our youth. And we know that our youth are traumatized, right? When they're in care, when they come into care, and multiple traumatic events happen. So it's important to approach the interventions with trauma-informed practices. And I just go back to being on the same page with stakeholders and understanding.
Awesome, thank you. Any last questions? Things that folks are noodling over, particularly as you think about applicability in Colorado. Again, thank you to our partners in Texas. You've been an invaluable resource for us today.
Hey, if you're going to end up starting something like this, we want to make sure that you have it right the first time.
We appreciate that.
Anything we can do to help, just let us know. We don't have it down perfect, but I feel good about what we're doing. I don't know what perfect even gonna look like yet.
No such thing. It's adaptive work. The needs are going to change, and we'll sort of keep evolving, I imagine, to be responsive as that happens. Well, awesome. Thank you all. Thank you both so much for your time, for your generosity in sharing. I imagine there may be some follow-up, so we'll have some discussion, and if there's any follow-up, we'll be sure to send any sort of questions your way. But we really appreciate again your willingness to spend so much time with us today.
All right.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day. Awesome. Well, fantastic. We did not talk about taking a break. But I imagine if any of you are like me and have had a reasonable amount of coffee so far today, you may need a bio break. So we're going to build that into the time that we had already allocated for all of you to review and digest the content that Jordan sent along last week, but then resent last night or yesterday afternoon, because some of the links were a little bit wonky. So we're going to right now, my clock says 52 after the hour. So I think we'll plan to come back together at quarter after. So we'll give you a little bit of time for a bio break and or to refresh your refreshments, and then also some time to dig into the content. We'll do a check-in at quarter after, and if any of you need more time, we're happy to accommodate that as well. Do folks feel pretty good about what they were able to get through? Does anyone feel like they need a little bit more time? If you feel good about where we are and want to have some discussion, just let me know. Thumbs up. For those of you off camera, you feel free to use your thumbs up or thumbs down icon. That'd be fantastic. All right, I see Brian. Jenna. Norma. What'd you say, Janelle?
I can hear you. Sorry, a donor just stopped by, so I'll be right back.
Okay, no worries. All right, I feel like we've had at least more than half. So why don't we go ahead and spend a little bit of time debriefing. Want to just sort of see what folks what's resonating with them, any additional follow-up questions they have. I know Jordan has a note catcher, so if we can maybe put that in the chat, I think that'll be a good guide for our debrief. Awesome, thank you.
Doris, do you want me to share and take notes as people?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you. All right, so I see just a couple in the note catcher, which is fine. We'll go ahead. Awesome, thank you. Since we have a scribe, I don't think that we all necessarily need to be in there. Awesome. So we just want to start with, just what stands out from both the presentation and also the questions that were posed and some of the follow-up from how Texas has implemented their special investigations unit, and then we'll start fleshing out what additional questions you have. I love the use of the term wonders. What are you still wondering about in terms of both their implementation, and then I think also how Colorado might implement some of the aspects of their special investigator unit. So we'll start with what stands out.
I think certainly that it's a state-run program, and having that flexibility of reaching out to that region to do the follow-up, knowing that the youth isn't going to necessarily be placed in that same location, is huge.
Yeah, I had actually pinged Jordan offline during the conversation around whether there were any examples of county administered systems that have implemented like a statewide approach. And in that research, they didn't find any. So trying to figure out how you can adapt a state administered approach in a county-based system, I think will be one of the challenges. What else stands out for folks from the conversation?
Well, I was kind of noticing how it was a real law enforcement style approach to the issue, as opposed to in Colorado, where we expect law enforcement to do it. So we take this as a specialized or focused skill set and task, and giving it to people that are focused, as opposed to in Colorado, where we give it to law enforcement generally. We get mixed responses by different agencies, and those people with tasked with it typically don't have the expertise in it because it's not their day-to-day job.
Yeah, I like that they took individuals who have a law enforced background, but sort of laid on the nuance of working with this particular population and information about the child welfare system, and kind of married the two, but really lean on that law enforcement expertise in the approach. What else stands out? I'd love to hear from some of the folks we haven't heard from yet in our conversation today. Anna, I saw you come on and off camera a couple times during the presentation.
Yeah, hi, I was actually just gonna jump into comment. And so I guess there was a couple of things that really stood out to me. One was the law enforcement lens that you and Brian have already kind of discussed. And, coming from my world of child welfare, kind of having a pause in regards to that, I think it has a lot of incredible benefits in the tools and the mindset of the location, and having a little bit of a pause in regards to that trauma-informed lens upon the interaction. with the child once located. So kind of hearing their model and kind of thinking of different ways of utilizing it. And then also really appreciating his discussion of how flexible they are with their tasks, with their, what they're focused on at the time for the safety of kids throughout the state, and not being so precise in regards to their specific label and role, but kind of looking from more the general lens. I thought that flexibility is amazing and also incredibly difficult to facilitate.
Awesome, thank you. Any others? Dennis, I'd love to hear your voice, particularly as another committee member who represents law enforcement. Anything stand out from your perspective?
Well, I'm with the Department of Human Services, so.
Oh, my bad.
Enforcement. I oversee licensing though, so. The first bullet, I don't think it's because licensing is a state-run entity. I don't know that that's a big barrier. That because it's county administered, that this could not be implemented on the state level. I think it could be.
Awesome, thank you.
I will say that CDHS leadership is skeptical of this idea.
Okay, can you say more about that?
They said they use it in very rare instances. The Division of Youth Services uses it in very rare instances, and it's really expensive for them.
Okay.
And it's not exactly like what Texas is doing. I don't know all the details because I'm not with DYS, but I think they are using private investigators possibly.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Did they name any other challenges beyond cost?
Well, I think part of their part of what was said to me was that they didn't feel like it would be like they were skeptical that it would be that it should be housed within CDHS as well.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. And I know that you're, speaking for others, but I think that, as we think about, as this group sort of grapples with what might be recommendations, sort of like thinking about how this could play out and how folks might receive it, and sort of from a messaging standpoint, and also from just a design standpoint, I think it's important to know what hurdles or concerns might exist.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to really look at our statutes too to see like how to, because can you have non-law enforcement people like, well, I don't, in Texas they're not taking custody of the kid, they're not putting the kid in custody, so I don't know. So
Thank you. Oh, Norma, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Did you want to say more about the question that you had about whether we've decided that this type of an intervention is what we want to do?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Can you hear me? You can?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to understand, is this group saying that this intervention is something that we absolutely want to do, or is this still something that we're exploring?
I'd say based on, and I don't want to misstate anything, but based on prior conversations, I know that there were some members of this, or I seem to recall that there were some members of this of the subcommittee or the committee writ large that weren't sure that this was necessarily something that they wanted to recommend in Colorado, but really wanted to explore this topic a little bit more, again, to see if it is something that could be implemented in Colorado, and if so, what, they say the devil is in the details, and I think starting to get more concrete on what those details might be would ultimately inform whether or not this group would be comfortable putting forth this as a recommendation.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no worries. Anything else that stands out for folks?
I'm having a hard time seeing it. I don't know if it's my eyeballs or my Zoom isn't working, but I'm struggling.
Can you see it? And is it small or?
We're good now. Thank you.
Okay, girlish eyeballs. Because I had that same struggle, and I was sort of like able to track it, but yeah, I had that same struggle as my eyes age. Thank you for magnifying a little bit, Jordan.
From my
Anything else?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Dennis.
Oh, I was going to say, from my perspective, I don't know that I would feel comfortable bringing this forward as a recommendation in a vacuum without evaluating the other recommendations, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to do a cost benefit analysis. And this is tracking towards maybe the most expensive thing possibly.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Dennis. I think that's an important highlight as we think about all of the recommendations that could potentially come from this group, having an opportunity to do that kind of an assessment, because it's important to be thinking about what could realistically be implemented, and that cost benefit is a way of informing that. So I appreciate you naming that explicitly, Dennis.
Also, just because I know the details pretty well. This thing would have not it wouldn't have helped Timothy Montoya, and it wouldn't have helped the other youth that ran from Devereaux. Those results would stay the same whether or not there's this group or not, right? And I would say that a huge chunk of our runaways are very short-term runaways. So what they're doing, this team wouldn't be able to intervene fast enough, right?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's important to think about, and I'm glad you made this explicit, about the reason why this task force came to be, and to what extent what gets put forth as recommendations would have had an impact on, again, the circumstances that ultimately led to this task force. I think that's another important point as we, as this group gets closer to refining recommendations, and, can do that analysis of the potential cost benefit and impact of a particular recommendation or potential recommendation.
Well, and this is Norma. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, I mean, I think that sort of one of the things that we've talked about is to identify, sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, sort of populations of kids, right? And, those kids that are at higher risk, perhaps something like this might be good. And then, the kids that aren't, there are other options. I think there are other things that, we still need to look at as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm so sorry. My hand was cramping. I'm sorry. Can you just restate that? I didn't mean not to catch it.
So I think Norma was just, oh, go ahead, Norma.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I think you can probably, you know, wrap it up before me.
So jump in if I misstate anything that that I heard from you, but I think ultimately Norma was just you know, reiterating or restating this the need for us to be, and now I lost my train of thought. Norma, can you please just restate what you said, because I completely lost my train of thought.
Sure. Yeah, no, of course. So I was just saying that I think that there are other options that we need to look at still. And one of the things I thought we had talked about was sort of I don't know, for lack of a better word, like severity of kids and having you know, some different options. And like I said, I think there's some things that we haven't discussed at all that I think, you know, we still need to, some ideas that we still need to sift through.
Thanks, Nora. And again, Doris, do you mind if I just kind of level set why we brought in Texas at this point? I think it might be helpful. So this group did agree, and the large group on the whole, to, as Doris said, consider those four. It's the standard response unit, standard policy and guides, and then potential temporary placements. We just had the opportunity to get Texas in at this meeting. And so what we're trying to do moving forward is just give you those tangential examples while moving forward into those bigger discussions. So if at the end of this, we could take maybe like 5 minutes to make sure we can hit exactly what you want on the agenda for the next meeting, where you want to hit exactly, that's going to be really helpful for us, so that we can kind of pull in there. We were just trying to give kind of this informational baseline here. So Normal, you're absolutely right. Dennis, you're right. We're still bringing all this together. And just a reminder to the group that we will come back to the cost directive in the statute once we work through our recommendations and subcommittees, and then as a whole we're coming back. So we were again trying to kind of remove that consideration and then come back after we as a group decide how we're moving forward. So I just wanted to lay that back out just kind of as a reminder for how we set this up.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jordan. And I think Norma's last comment provides a good transition to the other question that we wanted to explore in this debrief around what outstanding questions do we have, or additional information do we want, and the looking into differential kinds of responses. I think is one of those that we didn't dig into, or doesn't seem to be clear in Texas's approach. Can you scroll up a little bit too, Jordan? Awesome, thank you. So what other questions do all of you have as you think about the approach that Texas has taken? And, you know, whether it's questions that you have specifically about their approach, or as you think about to what extent Colorado could apply a similar approach, or something that's adapted from how Texas has is intervening with youth who run away.
This is Norma again. I guess I'm having, unfortunately I'm going to need to get off this meeting, but I guess I'm trying to understand, or I should have asked this question of them, which is, do they kind of put this plan into action for every child that runs? You know, for DYS, you know, they do have people that, you know, look for kids and things, but it's kids that have been committed to the department, you know, and so you know, their crimes are higher, you know, more severe, things like that. And so I'm just wondering, like, does Texas do it for every child that runs from a placement? Or is it for certain kids? Or, you know, I should have asked that question.
Thank you.
I also think with this model, it's very much so investigation based and not necessarily has anything in place for engaging with the youth to prevent it from happening again. And I
Yeah.
share with like Anna's concerns in regards to like the trauma informed piece of, you know, clearly defined roles. They talked about that. But using their role under the guise of you can talk to me, but then you're relaying that to law enforcement. I don't think that that's going to necessarily build that trust for the next scenario, the next incident. So
I agree with what Beth just said. That was the one thing that he said that raised my eyebrow a little bit. I mean, it was almost like a ruse. Hey, you can talk to me. Don't worry. I'm not going to tell anybody, but then you actually tell someone. The better thing to do is say, hey, we are going, if X, Y, and Z is said, we are going to report that. And the better trauma informed way to do that is to listen to them and to make sure you're encouraging that and building a better team around them so they feel comfortable to do so, but not doing so on their behalf. I mean, unless it's like a mandated reporting type of thing, but that was the one thing that raised my eye. I was like, okay, it was kind of like a snag and grab and tell, and that doesn't really work.
Yeah, thank you for that. What other questions or wonders do you have? I definitely think we want to add the question about it's sort of related to whether Texas puts this plan into action for every child, but it's looking at whether and to what extent Texas takes a different approach for kids who based on like a level determination of level of priority.
I can say here too that like a lot of our runaways, I'm gonna guess like a significant majority of our runaways, the kids are back at the facility before you could even implement this team, right? So, and also like and I probably should have asked them this, like I'm guessing it's like 10% of the population in facilities and in foster care that are creating like at least 70% of the runs, because it's just repeat runs, right? And they often look like running to the 7-Eleven and asking people for cigarettes and stuff like that, and then they come back, right? So I wonder if like you could probably, if you did not implement this for all the runs, and you were really taking a targeted approach on where you think this intervention could be helpful. And it clearly, to me, it looks like it could be helpful with kids that are gone from care for more than a day to a couple days, right? You could probably reduce the cost significantly if you were really targeting this intervention to the group that you think it could work with.
Yeah, I think that I asked the question about what amount of time, what percentage of their work is focused on youth who run away, because I was trying to get a sense of how much of their job is this function versus the support for, you know, all of the other functions that it had on that one slide for various roles inside DFPS. Because I didn't get a good sense of and Dennis, it sounded like you were getting at this too, about like when you think about the cost of implementing something like this, you have to think about like what is the volume of the kids that we're actually talking about for this task force that would need that kind of an intervention. And that part just it was never made clear to me in hearing from Texas. It varies. Yeah, it's going to vary.
My guess is it's not going to be a huge amount of youth that you're going to be targeting with this.
Yeah.
Now the question is, how do you identify who you are targeting? And I don't know, maybe length of time away is what you want to look at possibly. And then there would probably be some really high risk kids that you just know that that you want to try to move as quickly as you can, right?
Yeah, like the youth that had like, special like medical issues.
Right. And then you have like and then you have suicidal children too. Like, and so yeah. But there are ways to identify that population. It could be done.
All right, we're gonna maybe allot 2 more minutes for any outstanding questions that you have, and then we're gonna join the larger group or rejoin the larger group.
I have kind of a comment, sorry.
No
One of
worries.
the other things he said was, how they do like their nonprofits and things like that. And that directly kind of speaks to me because I get that a lot of nonprofits are kind of after the fact, after recovery, after that, all the long-term stuff, and I'm not. So that's a different space for me. And I don't know if they are utilizing, I don't know of anything like that in Texas except one, but I wouldn't suggest that one. That is actually going through training with law enforcement and getting background and vetted and things like that. Like I spent 2 years doing that to be able to go on scene and be that person that's not a law enforcement, like a mental health professional, whatever. And then that one consistent throughout. So I don't know why we're not tapping into more nonprofits around here. I mean, there isn't really any for kids anymore. When it comes at least to the HT side of things, it's all for adults. And so why are we not maybe squeezing the pool a little bit, if that makes sense, that's out there to see if we can train and vet and all of those things to maybe fill some of that gap? To help
Thank
with
you.
those things. I do not think nonprofits or anybody else besides law enforcement should be going out and recovering kids, though. Just let me put that out there.
Thank you.
That is a very, very law enforcement thing to do, and you don't know what you're going to pull in on. And there's a lot of these like rogue kind of crazy religious rescue teams that's I don't suggest it at all. It's not going to go well.
So I thought I heard, I'm looking at the notes and tracking what you said, Janelle. I thought you said that you did not think nonprofits should be going out to recover children.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And not only nonprofits, sorry, only law enforcement should be going to recover.
That's
You
what I
can
thought I heard.
train and vet and do all of that with someone to go with you, but you got to have law enforcement there because I've seen these rescue teams. There's one particularly in Colorado that was from Texas, and they're doing things and they have no understanding of the law or the legal system or anything like that or protocols in place. And then it's kind of like that catch a predator stuff. And then they end up messing up evidence and police can't do anything with it. And then they get mad because they stepped in a lane that wasn't theirs. And so as frustrating as it can be to not be able to go out and get these kids, we just have to figure out how we can dip into the pool to fill the gaps to help those situations. We can't become vigilantes.
Thank you. All right, we are going to rejoin the larger group. I hope that you found the time spent with Texas helpful in just getting a better sense of on the ground, what does this look like in another place, in another jurisdiction? And we'll continue to explore looking at other models and approaches as you know, that can inform our refinements and thinking about what could be possible in Colorado. I just put the link to the Zoom in the larger group that will rejoin. Jordan, you look like you were wanting to say something.
I just want to confirm, what do we want on the agenda for next month so I can prep? Do we want to go back to policies? Do we want to go to the catcher? Again, any guidance would be helpful so that we can get you what you need for those discussions and where you want to head.
Janelle, I saw you come off mute.
What'd you say?
You just came off mute. I thought you had something to say.
I did. My phone rang and I missed the last 5 minutes or 5 seconds. I'm really sorry. What did you tell me to do?
No worries. We were wondering for the agenda for next time, what would be most helpful for this intervention subcommittee? Looking at policy and practice,
Yes.
you know, starting to get to some of those nuts and bolts. I know that there was some conversation with Texas about legislative actions. So what would be especially helpful in moving this intervention conversation along?
I want to know about the legislative piece. Like, where did the money come from? How are they able to do this? Where did they draw it from? And then I want to know kind of what Dennis was saying, what rises to the level of them actually like deploying out to a runaway.
Okay, so we want to
That
stay
sounds like some of that.
team, not go to policies. I'm just
No.
I feel like the what rises to the level of intervention is a policy question. It's sort of policy protocol to me. Because they'd have to have that documented somewhere. And I think that it's probably a more than a Texas example kind of question.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of the things that were getting sent of this is what we follow, this is what we do. It was very basic, statewide, not specific government blanket stuff. And so that didn't really answer any of the questions.
Okay.
You know, if this, say it comes to their desk and they have to go out and do something for this situation, what boxes have to be checked for them actually to act?
we'll work on
Do
that.
they have to be gone so long? Do they have to be in placement? Does DHS have to be involved? Do they have to have so many runaways? Do they have to have a concern of trafficking? All of that. And then I really didn't get an answer either about what they do when they get back. Again, it was this very blanket thing. How do you identify the needs of a kid if we're only talking about how they could be a victim or their criminal acts? Because that's all I heard about was, oh, well, they might not want to talk to us because they were boosting cars or whatever. But when a kid comes back in from the run, at least in my experience, they're treated like we need to give them services so you actually build that team and that support and rapport around them to be able to maybe want to talk to law enforcement. So, you know what I mean? They don't have like an HRV tool or anything like that, and what they're doing to see those assessments and needs to go forward with next steps.
That's helpful. Thank you. I think we have public comments, so I'm going to get us over to the
We
other.
do.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you all. We'll see you all in just a bit. Click the link to join rejoin the larger group.
Okay, let's, so I know I wish we had more time to kind of debrief, but I know folks were doing the work in their groups. So looking forward to kind of capturing that more in our meeting synthesis, and then we'll be sure to share that out, and we'll make sure we carve some time next time around so folks kind of can also voice over what they got into with their group. But I don't know about y'all, but prevention was rocking and rolling. So Doris, I'm assuming the same for your crew as well. All right, so we have 2 requests for public comment. Want to make sure we offer enough time for that. So I see Pam and Steve. Steve, let's start with you. You've got would love to hear from you. Thanks for being here and appreciate your time. And I'll give you 3 minutes and let's go ahead.
All right, thank you. Just confirming everyone can hear me. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm Steve Fisher. I'm not in the system. My day job is a civil engineer. I'm a board member of Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, Colorado chapter. And the reason I'm interested in this group is because I've lived across the street from the Tennyson Center since 1995. So I've seen hundreds of runs and rescues. And I apologize, I wasn't it. I think I chose the wrong group. So I don't know what the other subcommittee talked about, but as an observer of this group, there may be a misunderstanding about egress and conflating fencing as equal to lack of egress from buildings or a quote unquote lockdown facility. I did some investigating some months ago on building codes, egress, exit discharges, safe dispersal areas, and public ways. These are all code terms. I found a great article in a trade magazine, which I think I posted to the chat just a little while ago, if you're interested. And I also got a favorable response from City of Denver Zoning and Architectural Permit Review on the code interpretation regarding fencing around facility. I think because refusal to employ secure lot fencing has led to injuries and deaths to runaways. It's important to clarify that there is nothing wrong with secure lot fencing, neither for adults, minors, individuals in residential care, or facility schools. State licensing rules stipulate that local jurisdiction zoning and building codes are to be met, and the adopted building codes, meaning residential code, building code, fire code, allow secure lot fencing when criteria for buildings and lot configuration are met. It could result in a lot less restraint. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. And Steve, just to answer your quick question, is the two groups are intervention and prevention. So I believe you're on the intervention side, and so we had a group talking around prevention as well. So certainly next time, welcome you if you'd like to switch groups, or you're welcome to jump into either group next time. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in, Trees, Steve, that session is also recorded. So you don't have to miss anything at all. You just go to the website. I'm sure we'll post that either today or tomorrow. And you can, and I say that to all the committee members, it's probably would be very interesting to be able to see what was going on in that room as well. So I just want you to know it's available.
Thank you.
Excellent call. Appreciate it. Thanks, Stephanie, for that reminder. Yeah, Steve, we'll have those up ASAP for each group, which is why the reason we did the two different links, so that we could make sure that we had the right recordings. All right. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Pam, would love for you to voice over. I know you dropped something in the chat, but only one group saw that. So welcome you to share with us.
Great. Thank you. Pam Trelaw, provider. This may be duplicative of what Becky or Brandon had shared in the group, because I walked into the middle of the movie. My apologies. But as we're talking about kind of where clients are and assessing and what do they need, just a reminder that that needs to be fluid and that needs to be timely, because as the clients enter treatment can look very different than 30 days into treatment, can look different right before discharge. And as kids and families are working through trauma or their issues, things could spike up. And I had heard one comment around, well, does a Ray do that? Yes, they could, but not everybody's always partnering immediately with a provider who has that direct responsibility of working with a child 24/7. So just to put that out, I'm sure we've got processes, but there's also practicalities and how things are really being implemented in Colorado in the here and now. And oftentimes outside of the provider working with the kiddo directly, other agencies coming in to do assessments or help are not timely and might not be accurate. So just putting that out there if we're looking at that. And then speaking on a broader term, I was in an interesting conference on Friday for over 6 hours through Lives in the Balance, Dr. Ross Green. And that was actually out of Maine, just miles away from the horrific shootings happened. So the timing was just horrific. But it was a conference on ending corporal punishment and ending seclusion and restraint. And I know that's a huge kind of end goal. And Stephanie, maybe I can send you the link, because they just put the whole recording online. But talking about a lot of federal bills and a lot of talk, Canada and the US side, around movements to make sure restraints and seclusions are ended, right? So that's not going anywhere. Hopefully that will be the end goal, that we all as a system can work efficiently enough so kids might not need that. But then as a reminder, as Colorado's putting things together, maybe there needs to be a step system, right? Because we have to look at how we're currently functioning now with all the systems involved with the kids and the families' lives and how it integrates. And so maybe there's a first step where, providers need to really work with the families and the kiddos and doing that emergency response plan, like Brandon was saying, which is in contradiction of maybe what the reg says, but the treatment plan needs to be fluid. updated all the time and right then and there. And then maybe long-term, as we have more time as a Colorado state system, getting better integrated practices, we could look at a larger end goal. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. And as always, for both of y'all, we really appreciate both of your continued engagement here. So it means a lot that you continually show up and share your thoughts. So thank you. And thanks, Pam, for those specific pieces as well. We'll make sure that we capture those. All right, y'all, we are at time. We crammed it in today. I'm proud of us. I know there are, so thank you. And excited to kind of like see all the pieces come together. As Stephanie mentioned, we recorded both groups. So if you are curious, or you want to dive into that, we will have those up just like we do regular meeting recordings. And then we'll also, of course, capture that in the meeting minutes for both groups and also the meeting synthesis as well. So with that, Stephanie, anything to say before we close out and say, I can't believe I'm going to say this, see you in December, which is wild. But yeah, Stephanie, anything to share with the group?
No, just thank you all for your thoughts. It's been a very thought-provoking day, and we will certainly continue to plug away, chisel away at what's a really hard issue. Just thank you.
Y'all, take care.